Dr. Lee walked through the sterile corridors of the Galactic Psychiatric facility, her footsteps echoing against the metal walls. This was her first day at the most advanced mental health facility in known space, where beings from dozens of different worlds came for treatment. She had spent years studying alien psychology, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to encounter. The facility stretched across 3 levels of Station Kepler 442, a massive structure floating in the void between star systems. Alien doctors and nurses moved efficiently through the halls, their various forms creating a strange but somehow comforting diversity. Lee had always believed that healing knew no species boundaries, and this place seemed to prove that point. Her supervisor, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes, led her to the maximum security ward. "We keep our most dangerous patients here," the creature explained in perfect standard galactic. "Most are suffering from severe delusions or violent tendencies." They stopped before a reinforced door marked with warning symbols in 12 different languages. Through the observation window, Lee saw her. The being inside was unlike anything she had ever encountered, even in her years of xenobiology training. Princess Hana, as the file indicated, possessed an otherworldly beauty that made Lee catch her breath. Her skin seemed to glow with a soft, pearl-like luminescence, and intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings traced across her arms and face like living tattoos. Her hair appeared to be made of fine crystalline strands that caught and reflected the harsh medical lighting. But what struck Lee most was not Hannah's alien beauty, but the excessive restraints binding her to the medical bed. Heavy metal cuffs secured her wrists and ankles, while additional straps crossed her torso. Even unconscious from heavy sedation, she was treated like a maximum security prisoner rather than a patient seeking help. "What exactly is her condition?" Lee asked, studying the unconscious figure through the reinforced glass. Her supervisor made a dismissive gesture with one of his forearms. "Royal delusion syndrome. She believes she is some sort of princess from a distant world called Veltara. The condition is more common than you might think among beings who have experienced severe trauma. She becomes violent when we try to correct her delusions, insisting that we are her captors rather than her doctors." Lee frowned as she opened Hannah's medical file on her tablet. Something felt wrong immediately. The documentation was surprisingly thin for someone who had been in the facility for several months. Basic information about her species was missing, and there were significant gaps in her treatment history. Most concerning of all, there were no baseline psychological evaluations from before her supposed breakdown. "Where are the initial intake reports?" Lee asked, scrolling through the incomplete files. "And why don't we have any information about her homeworld or cultural background? Understanding a patient's origins is crucial for proper treatment." The insectoid supervisor's mandibles clicked with what Lee had learned was a sign of irritation. "Dr. Lee, I understand you are new here, but we must trust the evaluations of more experienced staff. This patient is dangerous and delusional. Your job is simply to monitor her medication levels and ensure she remains stable. Do not engage with her fantasies about being royalty." As her supervisor left, Lee remained at the observation window, studying the sedated alien princess. Something about the entire situation bothered her deeply. In her years of medical training, she had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct was screaming that something was terribly wrong. The restraints seemed designed for someone much larger and more violent than the delicate being before her. The heavy sedation appeared excessive for someone who was supposedly just confused about her identity. Most troubling of all, the gaps in her medical files suggested either incompetence or deliberate omission. Lee made a decision that would change everything. She would find out the truth about Princess Hana, regardless of what her supervisors wanted her to believe. Over the next few days, Lee found herself spending more time observing Princess Hana than her other patients. Something about the alien's case nagged at her professional instincts. During her medical training on Earth, her professors had always emphasized the importance of careful observation and questioning established diagnoses when things didn't add up. The first sign that something was wrong came during Hana's medication cycle. Most patients with severe delusions showed consistent patterns of behavior, but Hana was different. When the heavy sedatives began to wear off, instead of the confused rambling typical of delusional patients, Hannah displayed remarkable clarity and intelligence. Her eyes, which glowed with a soft amber light, would focus with sharp awareness on her surroundings. "You are new here," Hannah said during one of these lucid moments, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed impossible given her current state. "I can see it in how you watch me. The others have already decided what they believe." Lee was struck by how articulate Hannah sounded, even with the translation device converting her alien language into standard galactic. Most patients with royal delusion syndrome spoke in grandiose, disconnected phrases. Hannah, however, communicated with the precise vocabulary and measured tone of someone accustomed to diplomatic conversations. "Tell me about yourself," Lee said, pulling up a chair beside the bed despite protocol suggesting she maintain distance from high-security patients. Hannah's bioluminescent markings pulsed gently, what Lee was beginning to recognize as a sign of emotional distress. "They brought me here after the summit on Proxima Station. I was negotiating mining rights for my world when everything went dark. When I woke up, I was told I had suffered a complete mental breakdown and that my memories of being royalty were fantasies created by trauma. The details were remarkably specific and consistent, unlike the constantly shifting stories typical of delusional patients." Hannah described political negotiations, trade agreements, and diplomatic protocols with the kind of intimate knowledge that could only come from direct experience. She spoke of her homeworld's crystal formations, their unique biotechnology, and the complex social structures of her people with the fluency of someone who had lived that reality. "They say I attacked the medical staff when they tried to help me," Hannah continued, testing the restraints that held her down. "But I remember being grabbed by beings in medical uniforms before I lost consciousness at the summit. How does someone have a mental breakdown and then attack people trying to help them?" Lee found herself unable to answer that question satisfactorily. The more she listened to Hannah, the more her supposed mental illness seemed questionable. The alien princess never contradicted herself, never showed signs of confused thinking, and displayed emotional responses that were entirely appropriate to her circumstances. Her growing doubts were interrupted when Dr. Kang, the facility director, appeared at the observation room door. The elderly Korean man had been running the psychiatric facility for over a decade, and his reputation throughout the galaxy was impeccable. His presence immediately made Lee feel like a student caught breaking rules. "Dr. Lee, I understand you've been spending considerable time with our high-security patient," Dr. Kang said, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "I wanted to personally warn you about the dangers of becoming too emotionally invested in cases like this." Lee straightened, trying to project professional confidence despite feeling like she was being scolded. "I'm simply trying to understand her condition better. Some aspects of her presentation don't match the typical patterns I studied." Dr. Kang's expression hardened slightly. "Princess Hannah, as she insists on being called, is one of the most dangerous patients we've ever treated. Her delusions are so complete that she has convinced herself that we are her captors rather than her doctors. She has physically attacked staff members and attempted to escape multiple times. The restraints and heavy sedation are absolutely necessary for everyone's safety. But her cognitive function seems remarkably intact during lucid periods," Lee protested. "And her stories are incredibly detailed and consistent. Shouldn't we at least verify some of her claims about her background?" The director's voice took on an edge that made Lee realize she was treading on dangerous ground. "Dr. Lee, I've seen dozens of doctors become convinced by patients with elaborate delusion systems. It's a common trap for inexperienced staff. These patients can be incredibly persuasive because they genuinely believe their fantasies. Your job is to provide medical care, not to validate dangerous delusions that prevent recovery." As Dr. Kang left, Lee felt more confused than ever. Everything in her medical training told her to trust her observations and question inconsistencies. But her supervisor's warnings carried the weight of experience and institutional authority. Still, one thought kept nagging at her. What if Princess Hannah was telling the truth? That night, Lee couldn't sleep. Dr. Kang's warnings echoed in her mind, but so did Hana's consistent and detailed accounts of her life. As a human, Lee had always possessed what her alien colleagues called an unusual trait, an instinctive distrust of authority when things didn't make sense. It was something that had gotten her into trouble during medical school, but it had also made her a better doctor. Unable to rest, Lee made her way back to the facility's central computer terminal. Her security clearance as a staff doctor gave her access to basic patient files, but she realized she had never tried to verify any of Hana's claims about her homeworld. If Hana was truly delusional, then searching for Veltara would turn up nothing or prove her stories false. The main galactic database contained information about every known inhabited world in the explored galaxy. Lee typed in Veltara, expecting to find either no results or perhaps some obscure planet that bore no resemblance to Hana's descriptions. Instead, her screen filled with detailed information that made her heart race. Veltara was not only real, but it was exactly as Hana had described it. The planet orbited a binary star system, creating the unique light conditions that Hana had mentioned. The world was covered in vast crystal formations that grew naturally from the planet's core, creating the stunning landscapes that Hana had spoken of with such longing. Most importantly, the database confirmed that Veltara was ruled by a constitutional monarchy with a single heir to the throne. Lee's hands trembled as she dug deeper into the files. Recent geological surveys showed that Veltara possessed some of the largest deposits of quantum crystals ever discovered. These crystals were essential for faster-than-light travel and were worth more than the entire economic output of most star systems. Any company that could secure mining rights to Veltara would become one of the wealthiest corporations in the galaxy. But accessing mining rights on Veltara required approval from the planetary government, specifically from the royal family. Lee's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. If Princess Hana was the sole heir to the throne, then her disappearance or incapacitation would create a power vacuum that outside interests could exploit. Lee knew she was crossing a line, but she couldn't stop herself from accessing the restricted corporate databases. Her medical clearance shouldn't have allowed her into these files, but the facility's security systems had a flaw that many staff members knew about but never reported. Late-night access for medical emergencies sometimes required doctors to bypass certain restrictions. What she found in the corporate mining records made her feel sick. 3 major galactic mining corporations had submitted formal requests for exploratory rights on Veltara in the past 6 months. All 3 requests had been denied by the planetary government, with specific rejections signed by Princess Hana herself. The most recent rejection was dated just 2 weeks before Hana's supposed mental breakdown. Lee dug deeper and found communication logs between the mining companies and various intermediaries. The conversations were carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, but the implications were clear. Several messages discussed removing obstacles to development and finding alternative solutions to governmental resistance. One particular exchange between executives from Stellar Mining Consortium caught her attention. The messages were encrypted, but medical staff had access to basic decryption protocols for patient confidentiality purposes. As Lee decoded the messages, her worst fears were confirmed. "The Veltara situation has been resolved," read one message. "The subject has been transferred to appropriate facilities for extended treatment. Medical professionals confirm that her condition is severe and likely permanent. Mining surveys can proceed as planned." Another message sent just days after Hana's admission to the psychiatric facility was even more damning. "Ensure that the medical staff understands the patient's dangerous tendencies. Any attempts to verify her claims should be discouraged. The treatment must continue indefinitely for everyone's safety." Lee sat back in her chair, her mind reeling from what she had discovered. Princess Hana wasn't suffering from delusions at all. She had been drugged, kidnapped and imprisoned in a psychiatric facility to remove her as an obstacle to corporate mining interests. The heavy sedation wasn't for her safety, or the safety of others. It was to keep her from communicating with the outside world or proving her identity. The most terrifying realization was that this conspiracy involved people within the facility itself. Dr. Kang's warnings, the gaps in Hana's medical files, and the excessive security measures all made sense now. Some of the staff were either being paid by the mining companies or had been deceived into believing they were treating a genuinely dangerous patient. As Lee deleted her search history and prepared to leave the computer terminal, she realized that she was now in incredible danger. She possessed information that could destroy a multi-billion credit mining operation and expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of galactic commerce. But she also held the key to freeing an innocent woman who had been robbed of her freedom, her identity, and her throne. The question now was what she could do about it without ending up as the next patient in the psychiatric facility's maximum security ward. The next morning, Lee noticed subtle changes in how her colleagues treated her. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms, and several staff members who had been friendly before now avoided eye contact. Her access card, which had worked perfectly for weeks, suddenly required supervisor approval for certain areas of the facility. Someone was watching her. During her rounds, Lee tried to act normally, but her mind raced with the implications of what she had discovered. She had been careful to cover her tracks in the computer system, but clearly not careful enough. Corporate interests with billions of credits at stake would have sophisticated monitoring systems in place. Her suspicions were confirmed when she arrived at Hana's room to find two unfamiliar figures in medical uniforms standing outside. They weren't doctors or nurses. Lee could tell immediately from their posture and the way their eyes constantly scanned the corridor. Security personnel disguised as medical staff. "Dr. Lee," one of them said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're conducting a routine security review. Please continue with your normal duties, but be aware that this patient requires extra monitoring due to recent behavioral changes." Lee nodded and entered Hana's room, her heart pounding. She had reduced Hana's sedation slightly over the past few days, claiming it was a standard protocol adjustment. Now she realized that even this minor change had been noticed and reported. Hana was more alert than Lee had ever seen her. The alien princess's bioluminescent markings were pulsing in complex patterns, and her amber eyes tracked Lee's movements with sharp intelligence. When Lee approached the bed, Hana spoke in a whisper so low that the monitoring equipment wouldn't pick it up. "They know you've been helping me," Hana said, her musical voice barely audible. "I can feel their thoughts pressing against my mind. The drugs they've been giving me, they don't just sedate, they block my natural abilities." Lee pretended to check Hana's vital signs while listening carefully. "What kind of abilities?" "My people are naturally telepathic," Hana explained, her markings shifting to softer blues and purples. "We can communicate across vast distances and sense the intentions of other beings. The compounds they've been injecting me with create a mental fog that cuts me off from my gift. But as the drugs leave my system, I'm beginning to reconnect." This revelation explains so much. If Hana could naturally sense deception and communicate telepathically, keeping her heavily sedated wasn't just about preventing escape. It was about cutting her off from any possible rescue or communication with her homeworld. Lee's training as a human doctor suddenly became crucial. Human medicine had always focused on chemical interactions and pharmaceutical solutions because humans lacked the telepathic and empathic abilities that many alien species took for granted. Her knowledge of drug interactions and metabolic processes was giving her insights that alien doctors might miss. "Can you contact your people now?" Lee asked, adjusting her medical scanner to look busy. Hana's expression grew strained with concentration. "I'm trying, but the distance is enormous, and I'm still fighting the effects of months of chemical suppression. I can sense something, though, confusion and searching. My people know something is wrong, but they can't locate me." That afternoon, Lee made a discovery that chilled her to the bone. While reviewing staff schedules in the medical database, she noticed irregular payment patterns in the facility's financial records. Several doctors and nurses had received substantial bonuses over the past 6 months, always dated shortly after Hana's treatment milestones. Dr. Kang himself had received 3 large payments from something called Medical Research Grant Foundation. A quick search revealed that this foundation was a shell company owned by Stellar Mining Consortium, the same corporation that stood to benefit most from Hana's disappearance. Even more disturbing, Lee found evidence that she wasn't the first. Staff member to question Hannah's treatment. Dr. Park, a psychiatrist who had worked at the facility before Lee's arrival, had submitted multiple reports questioning the diagnosis and requesting additional tests. His employment had been terminated abruptly for performance issues, and he had been transferred to a remote research station on the galaxy's outer rim. The pattern was clear. Anyone who showed too much interest in Hannah's case was either bought, off, transferred away, or silenced through other means. Lee realized she was walking a razor's edge between helping an innocent woman and becoming another casualty of corporate greed. As she prepared to leave for the day, one of the security guards approached her with a message. "Dr. Lee, Dr. Kang would like to see you in his office immediately. He says it's urgent." Lee's stomach dropped. She looked back toward Hannah's room, where the alien princess was probably struggling to maintain her mental connection with her distant homeworld while fighting off the effects of mind-numbing drugs. Time was running out for both of them. Walking toward Dr. Kang's office, Lee made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She wasn't going to abandon Hannah, no matter what threats or bribes awaited her. As a human, she had grown up hearing stories of people who stood up against impossible odds to do what was right. Today she would find out if she had that same courage when it really mattered. The confrontation that was about to unfold would determine whether Princess Hannah would ever see her homeworld again, or if both women would disappear into the vast network of corporate control that stretched across the galaxy. Dr. Kang's meeting had been a warning disguised as concern. He spoke about Lee's emotional attachment to difficult cases and suggested she take some time off to avoid burnout. The message was clear: stop investigating Hannah's case or face consequences. But Lee had made her choice. That night, she returned to the facility with a plan that would either save Princess Hannah or destroy them both. Human medicine had always been considered primitive by galactic standards because humans lacked the telepathic healing abilities that many species possessed. But this perceived weakness was actually Lee's greatest advantage. Human doctors had developed incredibly sophisticated knowledge of chemical interactions, drug metabolism, and detoxification processes that other species had never needed to master. Lee had spent hours researching Velteran physiology, using the facility's medical database. Their crystalline cellular structure processed toxins differently than most species, but the basic principles of human detoxification could be adapted. She began by slightly altering Hannah's IV drip, replacing some of the psychoactive compounds with harmless saline solution. "What are you doing?" Hannah whispered during one of Lee's late-night visits. The alien princess was more alert than she had been in months, her bioluminescent markings glowing with renewed vitality. "Helping you think clearly," Lee replied, checking the monitors to ensure no one was watching. "The drugs they've been giving you aren't just sedatives. They're specifically designed to disrupt telepathic function and create artificial memory problems. I'm slowly removing them from your system." As the days passed, Lee watched Hannah's transformation with amazement. The confused, heavily sedated patient was disappearing, replaced by someone with sharp intelligence and regal bearing. Hannah's natural telepathic abilities began returning, and with them came revelations that changed everything Lee thought she knew about the facility. "There are others," Hannah said during one of their secret conversations. "I can sense minds throughout this station that don't belong here. Political prisoners, inconvenient witnesses, anyone who stood in the way of corporate interests. They're all here, drugged and labeled as mentally ill." Lee felt sick as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. The Galactic Psychiatric Facility wasn't just treating genuinely ill patients. It was serving as a secret prison for anyone who threatened powerful business interests. The perfect crime, because who would believe the word of someone officially diagnosed as insane? But Hannah's returning abilities offered something Lee hadn't expected: hope. As her mind cleared, the Velteran princess revealed that her people's biotechnology was far more advanced than the galaxy realized. The crystalline patterns on her skin weren't just decorative. They were biological interfaces that allowed her to connect directly with electronic systems. "My people learned long ago to integrate our technology with our biology," Hannah explained, her markings shifting to display complex geometric patterns. These aren't tattoos. They're living circuits that can interface with any computational system. Lee watched in fascination as Hannah pressed her palm against the room's control panel. The alien's markings began glowing brighter, and suddenly the monitoring systems in the room went offline. Not broken or damaged, simply bypassed, as if Hannah had become part of the electronic network itself. I can access the station's main computer through any connected device, Hannah continued, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality as she interfaced with the technology. The security systems, communication arrays, patient records, all of it is connected, and now all of it is accessible to me. Working together, Lee and Hannah began identifying other prisoners hidden throughout the facility. There was Ambassador Chen from the Tau Ceti system, who had opposed a mining treaty just before his supposed mental breakdown. Minister Rivera from the New Columbia colony, who had been investigating corporate tax evasion before being committed for paranoid delusions. Councillor Nakamura from the Jupiter stations, who had been pushing for stronger worker protection laws before his family, reported his sudden psychological collapse. The list went on and on. Dozens of political figures, activists, and whistleblowers from across the galaxy, all conveniently developing severe mental illnesses just when their opposition to corporate interests became inconvenient. All of them heavily sedated, isolated, and labeled as too dangerous or delusional to be taken seriously. "We have to help them," Lee said, studying the files Hannah had accessed through the station's computer network. "But how do we prove what's happening here without ending up as patients ourselves?" Hannah's markings pulsed with determination. "My people have a saying, the crystal that stands alone breaks, but crystals that connect become unbreakable. We need to wake the others and coordinate our efforts. One voice can be dismissed as delusion, but dozens of voices telling the same story cannot be ignored." Lee realized that Hannah was right, but the logistics seemed impossible. How could they secretly treat dozens of patients without being caught? How could they coordinate a mass revelation without the corporate agents in the facility stopping them? The answer came when Hannah demonstrated another ability that left Lee speechless. By interfacing with the station's bio-neural networks, the alien princess could actually communicate directly with other telepathic species, even through the fog of psychoactive drugs. She could create a mental network linking all the prisoners, allowing them to coordinate and share information without using any external communication systems. "This is how we do it," Hannah said, her entire body now glowing with bioluminescent energy as she connected with minds throughout the facility. "We don't just escape, we expose everything. Every crime, every cover-up, every innocent person who was silenced. We make it impossible for them to hide the truth." Lee felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. They were about to take on some of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy, armed with nothing but human determination and alien biotechnology. The odds were impossible, but for the first time since discovering the conspiracy, Lee believed they might actually win. The real battle was about to begin. As Hannah's telepathic network grew stronger, Lee began to understand the true scale of what they were facing. Each night, working in secret while the facility's skeleton crew assumed their patients were safely sedated, they pieced together a conspiracy that stretched across dozens of star systems and involved some of the galaxy's most respected institutions. The psychiatric facility on Station Kepler 442 wasn't unique. Through her mental connections with other telepathic prisoners, Hannah discovered similar facilities scattered throughout the galaxy. Each one operated under the guise of treating mental illness, but their real purpose was far more sinister. They were elimination centers designed to remove anyone who stood in the way of corporate expansion. "There's a facility near Proxima Centauri that specializes in treating environmental activists," Hannah reported during one of their midnight planning sessions. "Another near the Vega system focuses on union leaders and worker advocates. They've created an entire network of these places, each one targeting different types of opposition." Lee felt overwhelmed by the scope of the conspiracy, but her human instincts proved invaluable in understanding how it all worked. While other species often accepted authority figures at face value, Humans had evolved a deep suspicion of power, structures that seemed too convenient or explained too little. It's brilliant in its simplicity, Lee realized as they reviewed the evidence. Who questions a psychiatric diagnosis? Who investigates when someone has a mental breakdown? And who believes someone who's been officially declared insane? The corporate strategy was devastatingly effective. Target someone who opposes your interests, have them kidnapped during a vulnerable moment, drug them with compounds that create symptoms of mental illness, and then have them committed to a facility you control. Once inside, keep them heavily, sedated and isolated while you proceed with your plans unopposed. But Lee's human perspective revealed flaws in the system that its creators hadn't anticipated. The corporations had become so confident in their methods that they'd grown careless. The same financial records that proved their legitimate business dealings also contained evidence of their illegal activities, if someone knew how to look for the patterns. Working with Hana's ability to access computer networks, Lee traced payment flows between the mining companies and dozens of seemingly unrelated organizations. Medical research foundations, psychiatric treatment centers, security, firms and even some government agencies were all receiving funding from the same corporate sources. "Look at this," Lee said, pointing to a series of transactions on her tablet. Every time someone opposes a mining operation, a psychiatric facility in that sector receives a large research grant within weeks. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. Hana's markings pulsed with anger as she processed the information. They've turned healing into a weapon. Mental health treatment, which should help people recover, has become a tool for silencing dissent. The more they investigated, the more Lee appreciated how her human background gave her unique insights. Other species in the galaxy had evolved with natural empathic or telepathic abilities that made deception difficult within their own communities. But humans had evolved as social predators, constantly competing and cooperating with each other in complex ways that required sophisticated abilities to detect lies and hidden motives. "My people spent millions of years learning to spot deception," Lee explained to Hana. "We had to because survival often depended on knowing who to trust. Other species developed telepathy or empathic bonds that made lying nearly impossible. But humans became experts at seeing through carefully constructed falsehoods. This skill proved crucial as they identified which staff members were genuine medical professionals and which were corporate agents. Lee could spot the subtle signs that someone was playing a role rather than acting authentically. The way certain nurses avoided eye contact when discussing specific patients, how some doctors gave answers that sounded rehearsed, the small inconsistencies in behavior that indicated someone was following a script rather than genuine medical protocols. Through Hana's telepathic network, they began reaching out to the families and governments of the imprisoned political figures. But they discovered that the conspiracy included sophisticated disinformation campaigns designed to explain away the disappearances. Family members had been told their loved ones were receiving specialized treatment for rare psychological conditions. Governments had been informed that their missing officials were in secure facilities for their own protection. "The beautiful part of their plan," Lee said with grim admiration, "is that everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. The families believe they're protecting their loved ones' privacy. The governments think they're respecting medical confidentiality. Even some of the staff here genuinely believe they're treating dangerous patients." But Lee's human skepticism had uncovered the truth, and now they had the evidence to prove it. Financial records, communication logs, patient files, and testimonies. From dozens of victims across multiple worlds, the conspiracy was vast, but it was also vulnerable because it depended on secrecy and the assumption that no one would dig deep enough to connect all the pieces. As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, Lee realized that her species' greatest weakness had become their greatest strength. Humans were often dismissed by other galactic civilizations as paranoid and overly suspicious. But in a galaxy where sophisticated deception was being used to suppress freedom and justice, a little paranoia was exactly what was needed. The network was exposed, the evidence was gathered, and now it was time to bring the truth to light. The breakthrough came when Hana made an offer that would change Lee's life forever. As they worked late into the night, Coordinating with the telepathic network of prisoners throughout the facility, Hannah noticed Lee struggling to process the overwhelming amount of information they were gathering. "Your mind is remarkable," Hannah said, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to soft greens and blues. "But you're reaching the limits of what unenhanced human cognition can handle. My people have biotechnology that could help you if you're willing to trust me." Lee looked up from the dozens of data files scattered across her tablet screen. Her head was pounding from trying to track financial records, prisoner locations, staff schedules, and communication intercepts all at once. "What kind of biotechnology?" Hannah extended her hand, and Lee could see the crystalline patterns beneath her skin glowing more brightly. "Temporary cognitive enhancement. My people developed it for our diplomats and scientists who needed to process vast amounts of information quickly. It won't change who you are, but it will allow your brain to work more efficiently for a limited time." The decision should have been difficult, but Lee found herself reaching for Hannah's hand without hesitation. As their skin made contact, Lee felt a warm, tingling sensation spreading up her arm. The crystalline patterns on Hannah's hand began to pulse in rhythm with Lee's heartbeat, and suddenly, the world became incredibly clear. Information that had seemed overwhelming moments before now organized itself naturally in Lee's mind. She could see connections between events that had been hidden before, understand patterns in the data that revealed new layers of the conspiracy, and process multiple streams of information simultaneously without confusion. "This is incredible," Lee whispered, her enhanced mind already working on solutions to problems that had seemed impossible just minutes earlier. "I can see everything now. The timing, the coordination, the way they've structured the entire operation." Together, they developed a plan that was audacious in its simplicity. The Galactic Council conducted routine inspections of psychiatric facilities every 2 years to ensure proper treatment standards. The next inspection of their facility was scheduled for the following week, and it would include representatives from dozens of different worlds. "We expose everything during the inspection," Lee said, her enhanced cognitive abilities allowing her to coordinate multiple aspects of the plan simultaneously. Hannah interfaces with the station's communication systems to broadcast evidence to every world simultaneously. The telepathic prisoners coordinate to all regain consciousness at the same moment, providing dozens of witnesses. And I present the medical evidence showing systematic drugging and abuse, but their increased activity hadn't gone unnoticed. As Lee's enhanced senses picked up subtle changes in the facility's routine, she realized that their time was running out faster than they had hoped. Security personnel were conducting more frequent patrols, staff members were asking more questions about patient treatment protocols, and several of the corporate agents she had identified were working overtime. The situation came to a head when Lee arrived for her shift to find the facility's main entrance sealed with emergency barriers. Red warning lights flashed throughout the corridors, and an automated announcement repeatedly declared that the station was under medical quarantine due to a potential biological contamination. "Dr. Lee, please report to the Central Security Office immediately," came Dr. Kang's voice over the communication system. But Lee's enhanced hearing detected the stress in his voice and the background sounds that suggested he wasn't speaking freely. Hannah's telepathic abilities, now stronger than ever due to the successful detoxification, confirmed Lee's suspicions. "They know," she said, her markings flashing urgent red patterns. "I can sense hostile intentions throughout the facility. The corporate agents have decided to eliminate us before we can expose them. The lockdown meant that no one could enter or leave the station. The Galactic Council inspection team, which had been scheduled to arrive in 3 days, would be turned away due to the supposed quarantine. Most importantly, Lee and Hannah were now trapped inside with security forces that had orders to ensure they never spoke to anyone outside the facility again. "How many of our people can we wake up?" Lee asked, her enhanced mind already calculating their options. "Most of the telepathic species, but the others will take time," Hannah replied, her hand pressed against the room's computer interface. "The security systems are being upgraded in real time. They're trying to lock me out of the station's networks." Lee realized that their careful, methodical plan was no longer possible. The corporate conspirators had decided to move against them directly, which meant they had to accelerate everything. Instead of waiting for the inspection, they would have to expose the conspiracy now, while fighting for their lives against security forces that had unlimited authority within the sealed facility. "Then we do this the hard way," Lee said, feeling the artificial courage that came with enhanced cognitive function. "We wake everyone we can, we override the quarantine, and we broadcast everything to the galaxy right now." As alarms began blaring throughout the facility, and the sound of armed security teams moving through the corridors grew closer, Lee realized that her human instinct for fighting impossible odds was about to be tested like never before. Enhanced by alien biotechnology and allied with a telepathic princess, she was about to take on some of the most powerful corporations in the galaxy in a battle that would determine the fate of everyone trapped within the station. The final confrontation was about to begin, and there would be no second chances. With the facility locked down and security teams closing in, Lee and Hana had to abandon their careful plan for the scheduled inspection. Instead, they would create their own moment of truth. Using her enhanced cognitive abilities, Lee coordinated a desperate gambit that would either expose the conspiracy to the entire galaxy or get them all killed in the attempt. "The quarantine signal is being broadcast on emergency frequencies," Lee realized, her enhanced mind processing the station's communication patterns. "Every world in this sector is receiving updates about the supposed biological contamination. If we can hijack that same signal, we can reach government officials and news networks across dozens of star systems simultaneously." Hana pressed both hands against the main computer interface, her entire body glowing as she fought against the security lockouts being implemented in real time. "They're trying to cut me off from the communication array, but they made one mistake. They built their security using standard galactic technology, but my people's bio-interfaces operate on principles they don't understand." The sound of energy weapons charging echoed through the corridors as security teams prepared to breach the medical wing. Lee could hear Dr. Kang's voice over the intercom, pleading with them to surrender peacefully, but her enhanced hearing picked up the strain in his words. He was clearly being forced to speak by someone pointing a weapon at him. "Now or never," Lee said, activating the emergency medical override that would wake every patient in the facility simultaneously. Throughout the station, sedation systems shut down and artificial gravity fluctuated as Hana redirected power to boost the communication array. The first patients to regain consciousness were the telepathic species, their natural abilities allowing them to shake off the drugs faster than others. Within minutes, a mental network spanning the entire facility linked dozens of political prisoners who had been silenced for months or years. Ambassador Chen from Tau Ceti was the first to speak clearly, his voice carrying across the hijacked emergency frequency. "This is Ambassador Chen reporting from an illegal detention facility disguised as a psychiatric hospital. I am being held against my will by corporate interests seeking to exploit my homeworld's resources." His words were immediately followed by Minister Rivera from New Columbia. Minister Rivera confirming, "I was kidnapped while investigating tax evasion by Stellar Mining Consortium. I have been drugged and held here for 8 months. As more voices joined the broadcast, Lee began transmitting the evidence they had gathered. Financial records, communication logs, and medical files flooded. The galactic network, faster than any censorship system, could block them. The enhanced cognitive abilities Hana had shared allowed Lee to organize and present the information in ways that made the conspiracy impossible to deny. But the corporate response was swift and violent. Security teams breached the medical wing, just as Councillor Nakamura was describing his illegal imprisonment. Energy weapon fire lit up the corridors as the prisoners, led by species with natural combat abilities, fought back with makeshift weapons and the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. Lee found herself in the middle of a running battle, using her enhanced reflexes to dodge weapons fire while maintaining the broadcast equipment. Her human adaptability, boosted by Veltaran biotechnology, allowed her to coordinate the technical aspects of their transmission while the liberated prisoners provided security. The broadcast is reaching every major news network in the sector, Hannah reported, her voice strained from the effort of maintaining multiple system interfaces simultaneously. But they're trying to jam our signal. I don't know how much longer I can hold the connection. The breakthrough came when the station's external communication array suddenly blazed with activity. Incoming transmission requests flooded in from government officials, news networks, and law enforcement agencies across the galaxy. The revelation was spreading faster than the corporations could contain it. "This is Admiral Park of the Galactic Defense Force," came a voice over the emergency frequency. "We are receiving your transmission and have dispatched immediate assistance. All corporate security personnel are ordered to stand down pending investigation." Within hours, the political earthquake was spreading across inhabited space. Worlds that had lost political leaders to mysterious mental breakdowns were demanding answers. Mining operations were suspended as governments realized their missing officials were alive but imprisoned. Stock prices for the involved corporations crashed as investors fled from the scandal. Lee watched the liberation unfold through security monitors as rescue ships arrived at the station. The corporate agents who had seemed so powerful just hours before were now frantically trying to destroy evidence and escape before authorities arrived. Dr. Kang, freed from his captors, was already providing testimony about the coercion and threats he had faced. "We did it," Hannah said, her bioluminescent patterns finally showing calm blues and greens for the first time since Lee had known her. "The truth is out there now, and it can't be hidden again." Lee felt the cognitive enhancement beginning to fade, but her natural human satisfaction at seeing justice served remained strong. They had taken on impossible odds and won, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through courage, determination, and the simple human refusal to accept injustice. As the first Galactic Defense Force Marines entered the facility, Lee realized that their victory was more than just exposing one conspiracy. They had proven that ordinary individuals could still fight back against overwhelming corporate power when they had the courage to stand up for what was right. The galaxy would never be quite the same again. 6 months after the broadcast that shook the galaxy, Lee stood on the crystal balcony of the Royal Palace on Veltara, watching the twin suns set over landscapes that seemed carved from living gemstones. The sight still took her breath away, even after spending weeks on Hannah's homeworld, helping to rebuild a government that had been left in chaos by her disappearance. The transformation had been remarkable. Princess Hannah's return to Veltara had triggered a political renaissance that spread far beyond her own world. The exposure of the psychiatric facility conspiracy had led to investigations on dozens of worlds, revealing corruption networks that reached into the highest levels of galactic commerce and government. "The Centauri delegation has agreed to the new mining protocols," Hannah said, joining Lee on the balcony. The alien princess now wore the traditional crystal crown of her people, but she had insisted on keeping Lee close as her special advisor on galactic affairs. "They're the 47th world to adopt our transparency standards." Lee smiled as she reviewed the latest reports on her tablet. The new protocols they had developed were revolutionary in their simplicity. Any corporation seeking resource extraction rights would have to submit to independent monitoring, provide full financial disclosure, and allow representatives from the affected worlds to participate in all negotiations. Most importantly, no deals could proceed without verified consent from legitimate local governments. "The mining companies are calling it unreasonable government interference," Lee noted with amusement. "Apparently, having to actually negotiate fairly with planetary governments is considered an outrageous burden." Hannah's laugh was like crystal chimes in the evening breeze. "Let them complain. Their profits were built on the suffering of my people and countless others. It's time for that to change." The changes went far beyond mining regulations. The revelation that psychiatric facilities had been used as secret prisons had triggered a complete overhaul of galactic mental health standards. Lee had been appointed to head the new Interspecies Medical Ethics Council, using her experience to develop protocols that would prevent such abuses in the future. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. For centuries, humans had been seen as a young, impulsive species, that was useful for manual labor and military service, but lacking in diplomatic sophistication. The discovery that human skepticism and investigative instincts had uncovered a conspiracy that fooled entire alien civilizations had forced a dramatic reassessment. The Andromedan Trade Federation wants to hire human auditors for all their major transactions, Lee reported, scrolling through the latest requests for human expertise. They specifically requested people with natural paranoia and unwillingness to accept convenient explanations. It was fascinating how humanity's perceived weaknesses had become their greatest strengths in galactic society. Human distrust of authority, their tendency to question official narratives, and their stubborn refusal to accept that some people were simply more important than others had proven invaluable in a galaxy where sophisticated deception was the norm. Lee had received dozens of job offers from world-seeking human advisors, investigators, and oversight specialists. Earth's government was scrambling to establish new diplomatic and consulting services to meet the demand. Humans were no longer seen as the galaxy's laborers, but as its conscience. "I've been thinking about what you said when we first met," Lee told Hannah as they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "About how humans refuse to let others define what's possible. I think that's exactly right, but it goes deeper than that." Hannah turned to listen, her bioluminescent markings glowing softly in the twilight. Other species evolved with natural empathy, telepathy, or other abilities that made them trust their communities instinctively, Lee continued. But humans evolved as individuals who had to constantly evaluate whether to cooperate or compete with each other. We became experts at spotting deception, questioning motives, and refusing to accept that just because something is convenient for powerful people, it must be right. The irony wasn't lost on Lee that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was their willingness to be difficult, to ask uncomfortable questions, and to stand up for people who couldn't defend themselves. Traits that had often made humans seem troublesome in peaceful times had proven essential when real trouble arose. "There's something else," Hannah said, pulling up a holographic display that showed mining activity across the galaxy. "The new protocols. They're working better than we hoped. Worlds that were being exploited are now genuine partners in development. Several colonies have reported increased prosperity since the corporations started negotiating fairly instead of simply taking what they wanted." Lee realized that their victory had accomplished something she hadn't expected. By forcing powerful interests to operate honestly, they had actually created more prosperity and stability than the previous system of exploitation and deception. Justice wasn't just morally right, it was also more efficient in the long runs. They headed back inside the palace. Lee reflected on how much her life had changed. She had started as a simple doctor trying to help one patient and ended up helping to reshape galactic politics. But the most important change was internal. She had discovered that the human trait of refusing to accept injustice wasn't just admirable. It was necessary for a civilized galaxy to function. The future looked brighter than it had in centuries, and it was humans who had helped light the way.